We need someone more innovative in your position, Alex. Someone willing to take necessary risks. My boss, Victoria Reeves, sat across from me in the glass-walled conference room of Palmer Engineering's downtown Seattle office. My boss, Victoria Reeves, told me that my position at Palmer Engineering needed to be filled by a more innovative person, someone who was willing to take risks. We were sitting in the downtown Seattle office's glass-walled conference room. Her expression was a practiced blend of corporate sympathy and resolute decision-making. Next to her, Chad Donovan, the newly appointed project director who had been with the company all of 4 months, nodded in agreement. She had a professional expression that mixed corporate sympathy with a firm resolution. Beside her, Chad Donovan, who had only been with the company for 4 months as the new project director, was nodding his head in agreement. My name is Alexander Mitchell. I'm 45 years old and had spent the last 12 years as chief safety engineer at Palmer Engineering, one of the West Coast's most respected structural engineering firms. I am Alexander Mitchell, 45 years old. For the past 12 years, I had been the chief safety engineer at Palmer Engineering, which is considered one of the most respected structural engineering companies on the West Coast. I'd overseen safety protocols for bridges, high-rises, and municipal infrastructure projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all without a single major incident or structural failure. During my time there, I was responsible for the safety procedures for bridges, high-rises, and municipal infrastructure projects. These projects were worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and none had a single major incident or structural failure. Your performance isn't the issue, Victoria continued, sliding a folder across the polished table. Your expertise is valuable, but in a supporting role. Chad will be taking over as chief safety engineer, while you'll transition to senior safety consultant, reporting to him. Your work isn't the problem, Victoria stated, pushing a folder over the glossy table. Your expertise is important, but it's more suited for a supporting position. Chad will become the new chief safety engineer, and you will move into the role of senior safety consultant, reporting to him. I glanced at the reorganization documents. A 30% salary reduction, removal from the executive leadership team, reassignment to a windowless office on the 3rd floor, a demotion in everything but name. I quickly looked at the documents about the new company structure. The documents showed a 30% pay cut, removal from the executive leadership, and a move to a windowless office on the 3rd floor. This was essentially a demotion, even though it wasn't called that. May I ask what prompted this decision? I kept my voice measured, professional, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. What led to this decision? I asked calmly and professionally, even though my heart was pounding. Chad leaned forward, his expensive watch catching the light. We need to accelerate our processes if we want to remain competitive. Your approach to safety assessments, while thorough, adds weeks to project timelines. The Webster Tower project is already behind schedule because of the additional testing you've insisted on. Chad, with his pricey watch reflecting the light, leaned in. We need to speed up our processes to stay competitive. Your detailed safety checks, while comprehensive, are adding weeks to our project schedules. The Webster Tower project is already delayed because you demanded more testing. The Webster Tower, a 62-story mixed-use skyscraper in downtown Portland, our most prestigious project to date, with a $50 million design contract and nearly $1 billion in total construction costs. The Webster Tower was our most important project so far, a 62-story mixed-use skyscraper in downtown Portland. The design contract was worth $50 million, and the total construction costs were almost $1 billion. A project where I'd identified potentially serious issues with the foundation design that Chad and the project team had repeatedly downplayed. On this project, I had found serious problems with the foundation design, which Chad and the project team had repeatedly dismissed as minor. Those tests are necessary, I said carefully. The soil composition reports showed anomalies that could affect long-term stability. The computer models aren't accounting for. The tests are essential, I stated cautiously. The soil reports revealed irregularities that could impact the building's stability in the long term. The computer models aren't factoring in. The models are state-of-the-art, Chad interrupted, and the client is getting impatient with delays. Every week we spend retesting costs them millions in projected revenue. The models are cutting edge, Chad cut in. The client is getting frustrated with the delays. Every week we spend on retesting costs them millions in anticipated earnings. Victoria's expression softened slightly. Alex, you've been an asset to Palmer for many years, but times change, methodologies evolve. The board feels your conservative approach is holding us back from the agile engineering that clients expect today. Victoria's expression softened a little. Alex, you've been a valuable employee at Palmer for a long time, but things are different now, and methods have changed. The board believes that your cautious approach is preventing us from providing the quick and flexible engineering services that modern clients want. Conservative approach. That's what they called rigorous safety protocols and thorough testing. In 12 years, not one of my projects had failed structural integrity assessments or required costly mid-construction redesigns. They called my strict safety procedures and detailed testing a conservative approach. In 12 years, every project I worked on passed structural integrity tests and never needed expensive design changes during construction. But that success was invisible. You can't see disasters that never happen. But my success was invisible. You can't see a disaster that was prevented. I closed the folder without signing. I'd like some time to review this. I closed the folder without signing and told them, I need some time to look this over.
Victoria
We need someone
nodded.
more innovative in your
Of course.
position, Alex.
We'll need your decision
someone willing
by Monday.
to take necessary risks.
Chad needs to present
My
the new
boss,
organizational
Victoria
structure
Reeves,
to the Webster
sat
client
across
next
from me
week.
in the glass-walled conference
Victoria
room
nodded.
of Palmer Engineering's
Of course.
downtown Seattle office.
We need your answer by Monday.
My boss, Chad
Victoria
has
Reeves,
to show the new company
told me that my
to the
position
Webster
at Palmer
client
Engineering
next week.
needed to be filled by
I
a
left
more
the
innovative
conference
person.
room with a folder
Someone
tucked
who
under
was
my
willing
arm.
to take risks.
Feeling the eyes of
We
my
were
colleagues
sitting in the downtown
as I
Seattle
walked back
office
to my
glass wall
glass-walled
office.
conference room.
An office I
Her
apparently
expression
wouldn't
was
have
a
by
practiced
next week.
blend of corporate
News
sympathy
traveled fast
and resolute
open floor
decision-making.
plans.
I
Next
walked
to
out
her,
of the conference
Chad
room
Donovan,
with a folder
the
under my
newly
arm,
appointed project
aware of my
director
coworkers
who had been with
watching
the
me
company
as I
all
headed
of
to
4
my corner
months.
office.
Nodded in agreement.
I knew I wouldn't
She
be
had
in
a
that office
professional
next
expression
week.
that mixed
Open
corporate
plan offices
sympathy
meant
with a
that
firm
news
resolution.
spread quickly.
Beside
At
her,
my desk,
Chad Donovan,
I unlocked the bottom
who had
drawer
only been with the
and pulled
company
out
for
a thick
4
binder
months
labeled
as
Webster
the new
Tower
project
Foundation
director,
concerns.
was nodding his head in
Inside were
agreement.
detailed analysis.
My name
is
Alternative testing recommendations.
I'm 45
and
years
email
old
threads
and
where
had
I'd
spent the
raised
last
concerns
12
about the
years as
foundation
chief safety
design being
engineer at Palmer
inadequate for the
Engineering,
site's geological
one of the West
characteristics.
Coast's most respected
At my
structural
desk,
engineering
I
firms.
opened
the bottom drawer
I am
and took
Alexander
out a
Mitchell,
thick binder titled
45
Webster
years
Tower
old.
Foundation
For the
Concerns.
past 12 years,
It contained
I had been the
detailed
chief
analysis,
safety engineer at Palmer
suggestions
Engineering,
for different tests,
which is considered
and
one
email
of the most
conversations
respected
where I had
structural
voiced
engineering
worries
companies
that the
on the West
foundation
Coast.
design wasn't suitable
I'd
for the
overseen
ground
safety
conditions
protocols
at the site.
for bridges.
Every
High
warning
rises
had been
acknowledged,
and municipal
then
infrastructure
summarily
projects
dismissed.
worth hundreds of millions
Cost
of dollars,
considerations,
all without a
timeline
single major
pressures,
incident
acceptable
or structural
risk
failure.
tolerances. During my
Each of
time
my
there,
warnings had been
I was
noted but then
responsible
quickly
for the
ignored,
safety
with
procedures
the
for
team
bridges,
citing cost
high
issues,
rises,
time
and
constraints,
municipal
and
infrastructure
acceptable
projects.
risk levels.
These projects
I'd
were
built
worth
my
hundreds
career
of
on
millions of
preventing
dollars,
disasters
and
before
none
they
had a
happened.
single major incident
Now I
or
was being
structural
demoted
failure
because prevention
Your
wasn't
performance
flashy
isn't
enough
the
for the
issue.
new leadership.
Victoria continued.
My career was
sliding
built
a
on
folder
stopping
across the
disasters
polished
before
table.
they occurred. Your expertise
Now,
is valuable.
I was being
but in
demoted
a
because
supporting
preventing
role,
them
wasn't exciting
Chad
enough
will be
for the new
taking
management.
over as chief safety
As I
engineer.
drove home that
While
evening,
you'll transition
I
to
realized
senior
my
safety
options were
consultant,
limited. Reporting to
I
him.
could accept the demotion.
Your work isn't the problem.
Watching silently
Victoria
as Chad
stated,
pushed forward with
pushing
an
a
inadequate
folder
safety
over the
measures.
glossy table.
I could
Your
resign and
expertise
protest,
is important,
walking
but it's
away
more
from
suited
12
for a
years of
supporting
building my
position.
reputation.
Chad will
Or I
become
could
the new
fight.
chief safety engineer.
But how do you prove a
And you will
disaster
move
might
into
happen
the role
before
of
it does?
senior safety consultant.
Driving home,
reporting to him,
I realized I didn't have
glanced
many
at the
choices.
reorganization documents.
I could take the demotion,
a 30%
and
salary
silently
reduction,
watch Chad
removal
proceed
from
with
the
inadequate
executive
safety
leadership
measures.
team,
I
reassignment
could quit
to
to
a
a
windowless office
giving
on
up
the third
12
floor,
years of work
a
building my
demotion
reputation.
in everything but name.
Or I could fight
I
back.
quickly looked at the
But
documents
how do you
about
show
the new
that a
company
disaster
structure.
will happen before it
The
occurs?
documents showed a 30%
The night
pay
I barely
cut,
slept.
removal from the
My
executive
wife,
leadership,
Elena,
and a move
civil
to a
engineer
windowless
herself,
office on the third
listened
floor.
as I explained the situation.
This was essentially a demotion.
They're making a terrible
even though
mistake,
it wasn't called
she
that.
said,
May
her
I
face
ask what
illuminated by the
prompted this
bedside
decision?
lamp. I kept
Your
my
safety
voice
record
measured,
is impeccable.
professional,
I
though my
barely
heart was
slept that
hammering
night.
against my ribs.
My wife,
What
Elena,
led to this
who is
decision?
also a civil engineer,
I asked calmly and
listened to
professionally,
me explain what had
even
happened.
though my heart was pounding.
They've made a huge error.
Chad leaned forward,
She said,
his expensive
her
watch
face
catching
glowing in
the
the
light
light
from the lamp.
We need to
Your
accelerate
safety
our
record
processes
is perfect.
if we want
That's
to
the
remain
problem.
competitive.
I replied,
Your approach to
success
safety
in safety
assessments,
means nothing
while
happens.
thorough, adds weeks
It's
to project
invisible.
timelines.
Failure is what
The
gets
Webster
noticed.
Tower project is
That's the
already
issue.
behind schedule.
I responded,
because of the additional
when you
testing
succeed
you
with
insisted
safety,
on.
nothing happens.
Chad,
and
with
no
his
one
pricey
notices.
watch reflecting the
Failure
light,
is what
leaned
people
in.
see.
We need
She
to speed
squeezed
up
my
our
hand.
processes to stay
So
competitive.
what will you do?
Your
I
detailed
stared at the
safety
ceiling
checks,
for a long
while
moment.
comprehensive,
Document
are adding
everything.
weeks to our project
If
schedules.
they want to ignore proper
the
safety
Webster Tower
protocols,
project is
I need to
already
make sure
delayed
it's
because
clear
you
I warned
demanded
them.
more testing. She held my hand
The
tightly.
Webster
Tower.
What are you
a
going to do?
62-story mixed-use
For a moment,
skyscraper in
I
downtown
stared at the
Portland.
ceiling.
Our most
I'll
prestigious
document
project to
everything.
date, with a
If they
$50
choose
million
to ignore the
design
correct safety
contract
procedures,
and nearly $1
I need to
billion
make
in
sure
total
there's proof that I
construction
warned them.
costs.
The
The
next
Webster
morning,
Tower was
I
our most
arrived at the
important
office
project so
early
far
and sent
a
a detailed email to
62-story
Victoria,
mixed-use skyscraper
Chad,
in downtown
and the
Portland.
company's legal counsel.
The design contract
I
was
outlined
worth
my
$50
specific
million
concerns about the
and the
Webster
total
Tower
construction
foundation
costs
design.
were almost $1 billion.
Attached my previous
A
communications
project
on the
where
issue,
I'd identified
and formally
potentially
requested
serious
that my
issues
objections be
with the
noted in the
foundation
project
design
documentation.
that Chad and
I
the
got to
project
the office
team had
early the next
repeatedly
day
downplayed and sent a
On this
thorough
project,
email to Victoria.
I had found serious
Chad,
problems
and
with
the
the
company's
foundation
legal
design,
team.
which
I
Chad and the
detailed my
project
concerns
team
about
had
the Webster
repeatedly
Tower's
dismissed as
foundation
minor.
design. Those tests
Attached
are
my
necessary.
previous
messages on
I
the
said
topic
carefully,
and officially
the soil
requested that my
composition
objections
report
be
showed
included in the
anomalies
project's
that could
documents.
affect
long-term
An
stability.
hour later,
the
Victoria
computer models
appeared at my
aren't
office
accounting
door.
for.
This
The tests
email
are
is
essential.
unnecessarily
I
alarmist.
stated cautiously.
Alex, she
The
said,
soil reports
closing the
revealed
door behind her.
irregularities that could
You've
impact
made your
the building's
concerns known.
stability in the long
The
term.
team has
the
evaluated them
computer models
and determined
aren't
the
factoring
design
in.
is sound.
The models are
An
state-of-the-art.
hour
later, Victoria
Chad
came to
interrupted,
my office door,
and the
client is getting
She
impatient
closed it
with
behind
delays.
her and said,
Every
Alex,
week we spend
this
retesting
email is a
costs
bit
the
much.
millions in projected
You've
revenue.
already voiced your concerns.
The models are cutting
and
edge.
the team has looked at
Chad
them
cut in.
and decided that the
client
design
is
is
getting
safe.
frustrated with the delays.
I'm just ensuring my
Every
professional
week
assessment
we spend
is
on retesting
documented.
costs
I
the
replied,
millions in anticipated
as a
earnings.
licensed engineer,
Victoria's
I have an ethical
expression softened
obligation to
slightly.
report safety concerns.
Alex, you've been an
I'm
asset
just
to
making
Palmer
sure my
for many
professional
years.
opinion is
But
on
times
record.
change. I said, methodologies evolve.
As a licensed
The
engineer,
board feels your
I am
conservative
ethically
approach
required
is
to
holding us
report
back
safety
from
concerns.
the agile engineering that
Her
clients
expression
expect
hardened.
today.
The decision
Victoria's
has been
expression
made. Softened a little. If you can't support the
Alex,
team's direction,
you've been a valuable
perhaps
employee
the
at
senior
Palmer
consultant
for a long
role
time.
isn't appropriate
But things
either.
are different now.
Her face
and
became
methods have
serious.
changed.
The
The
decision
board
is
believes
final.
that your cautious
If you
approach
can't
is
get on
preventing
board
us
with the
from
team's
providing
direction,
the quick and
then
flexible
perhaps the
engineering
senior consultant
services
position
that modern
isn't right for you
clients
either.
want.
The threat was
Conservative
clear.
approach.
Fall in line
That's what they
or be
call
pushed
rigorous
out
safety
entirely.
protocols, and
The
thorough
message was
testing.
obvious.
Either
In
agree
12
with
years,
them or
not
be
one of my
completely
projects
removed from
had
the
failed
company.
structural
integrity
I spent the
assessments
weekend
or
reviewing my
required
options with
costs and
Elena and
mid-construction
consulting
redesigns.
discreetly with a lawyer
They called my
friend
strict
who
safety
specialized in
procedures
employment
and
law.
detailed testing.
By Monday morning,
Conservative approach.
I had made my decision.
In
12 years,
that weekend,
every project
I
I worked
discussed
on
my
passed
choices with
structural
Elena
integrity
and
tests
quietly got advice
and never
from a
needed
lawyer
expensive
friend who
design
specialized
changes
in
during
employment
construction.
law.
By
But that
Monday,
success was
I
invisible.
knew what I was going to do.
You can't see disasters
I
that
signed the
never
demotion
happen.
paperwork, but
my
added a
success
written
was statement
invisible.
reiterating my safety
You can't
concerns
see a disaster
and
that was
noting that my
prevented.
signature
I
represented
closed the folder
acknowledgement
without
of the
signing.
reorganization,
I'd like
not
some time to
agreement with
review
the
this.
Webster Tower safety
I closed the
assessments.
folder without signing
I
and
signed
told
the
them,
demotion papers.
I need some time
but
to
I
look this
also
over.
included a written statement that repeated my safety concerns and clarified that my signature was to acknowledge the new structure, not to agree with the safety evaluations for the Webster Tower. Victoria frowned when I handed her the annotated documents. This isn't necessary, Alex. When I gave her the marked-up documents, Victoria frowned and said, Alex, this is not needed. I believe it is. I held her gaze until she looked away. Fine. Your new office is ready. It will help if you relocate today. I think it is, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. All right. Your new office is ready. It would be helpful if you moved in today.
My
Victoria
new
someone
space
more
was
innovative
indeed
in
on
your
the third
position.
floor.
Alex,
We'll
a
need your
windowless
decision
by
by
Monday.
Monday.
Necessary
Half the
size
size
of
of
my
my
previous
previous
my
boss,
new organization
with
institutions
the
beige
beige
wall
sat
across
next
from
to
me
me
in the
fluorescent
glass
lighting
wall
that
Victoria
hung
nodded.
of Palmer Engineering.
Of
My
downtown
name had already
Seattle
been
on
removed
We need your
from the
answer by
executive
Monday.
my
board
boss,
directory.
Chad
Victoria
has to
Reeves,
show
the
the
new
new
company
told me that my
floor
position
was
at Palmer
in fact
Engineering
weak.
needed
A
to be
windowless
filled by a more
interior
innovative
conference
person
room
with a
It was
full
someone who was
size
willing
of
to
my
take
old
risks.
office. Feeling the eyes of
We
my
were sitting in the
colleagues
downtown
as I
Seattle
walked back to
office
my
by
glass
buzzing
wall
fluorescent
conference
lights.
room.
An office.
My
I
name
had
had
already
been
been
taken
taken
off
off
blend
blend
of
corporate
news
directory
traveled fast
and resolute
over the next
decision-making.
3 weeks.
I
watched
walked out of
as
the
Chad
conference
dismantled
room
many
with
of
the
the
folder
safety
under my
protocols
appointed
I'd
project
established.
aware of my
Who
coworkers
had
watching
additional
the
soil
company as
testing
I headed
for
to
the
my
Webster
corner
Tower
office.
was
Not in
canceled.
agreement. I knew I
Redundant
wouldn't
structure
be
had
able
an
to process
professional
next
deemed
week.
excessive that mixed
And
the
the
design
design
timeline with
that
a firm
progressed
by
very
nearly
quickly.
30%.
Beside
At my
her, with
desk,
final
Chad
approval
unlocked the
fast-track
bottom
who had
drawer
only been with
developed
the
and pulled out
accelerated
for 4
course
months
months
labeled
schedule
as the new
Tower
project
for the next
director
3 weeks.
was nodding
I
his head
observed
and
Chad
inside were
eliminating
detailed
many of
analysis.
the My name is Alex
alternative
Vandermeer. I had
testing
put in place.
recommendations.
I'm 45
and
years
email
old
threads
and
where
have
I've
spent
raised
Webster
concerns
Tower
about the
years.
foundation
She
design
said
being
structural
inadequate for the
analysis
site's
were considered
geological
one of the West
characteristics.
Coast's most respected
design
my
schedule
schedule
was short
I
burn by
opened the
almost
bottom
30%.
drawer.
I am
and took out
Alexander
a final
Mitchell,
approval
45 years old.
For the past 12
years,
years, it contained
I had been the
detailed
chief
analysis,
safety engineer at Palmer
suggestions for
Engineering.
different
I
tests,
documented
and
my
email
most
conversations
respected
where I had
structural
voiced each
engineering
time
companies
that the
I was on the West
foundation
Coast.
design wasn't
Every
suited
time
for
a
the
safety
ground
measure
station
was
protocols
cut,
for
I
bridges.
wrote down my
Every
high-rises
rises
had been acknowledged.
and municipal
time
infrastructure
my
projects
concerns
were
were
hundreds
ignored.
of millions
Cost
of dollars.
considerations had
all
once
without
sought
a
my
single
interest
major
now
incident
avoided
of
acceptable
structural
risk
failures.
hallways. During
I
my
have
time
become
the
warnings
company,
have been
I was
noted, but then
responsible
quickly
over the
overlooked.
safety
With
procedures
its
for bridges,
exciting costs,
high-rises,
modern
methodology, and municipal infrastructure
projects
levels.
who used to
These
ask for my
projects were
opinion,
worth hundreds of
now
millions of
avoided
dollars.
making disasters,
And none
they
had a
in the
single
hallways.
major incident.
Now I was
or
being
being demoted
demoted
because prevention
Your
wasn't
performance
flashy enough
overly
to
careful
new
engineer
leadership.
Victoria continued.
My
My
career
career
was
was
lighting
built
a
on
folder
stopping
across on
disasters
Wednesday of the
before
fourth
they
week.
occurred. Your
Chad called a
expertise is
design team
valuable.
meeting to
But in a
announce
supporting
that the
building
Webster
wasn't
Tower
exciting
final
enough to
design
take manager
had
as
been
chief
approved
safety
as I
engineer
drove
to the
home
client.
that
While you'll
evening.
transition
I
to
realized
senior
milestones
safety
were
consultant,
limited for Palmer
reporting to
Engineering.
him.
I could accept the
He
demotion
announced
to the
isn't the
assembly
problem.
watching silently
Victoria
as
had
thanks to a
staged
streamlined
forward,
pushing
pushing
a folder over the
we
glossy
delivered a
table.
cutting-edge
I could
design
resign
and
ahead of
expertise is
schedule,
important.
walking
But
away
it's more
from
suited
12
for
years
a
of
supporting
building my
position.
reputation.
For weeks
Chad
later,
will
I
become
can
a
win
fight.
chief safety
Chad,
engineer
how do you
call a
prove a
meeting
disaster
and you will
might
move
happen
team
before
to
it
announce
does?
senior
That
safety
the
consultant
final
driving
design
home
for the
Webster
Webster
Tower
Tower
I realized
had
I
been
do
approved
have
many
such a
such
reorganization document.
I could
This
take
is
the
a
major
major
accomplishment
and
of
salary
Palmer
reduction. Watch
Engineering.
Chad
Removal
proceed
from
with
the
inadequate
executive
leadership
because
team.
we streamlined our
I could
processes
quit into a
to a
windowless
we were able
office,
to
giving up
deliver
12
state-of-the-art
years of work
design
building my
reputation.
reputation everything but name.
Construction started
I
next
quickly
month.
looked at the
But
document.
how
I
do you
saw
show that a
silently in the
disaster
back
will
of the
happen
room.
before it
The
occurs?
document showed a 30%
the night I made
barely
presentation
slept.
did
Removal
Chad
from the
mention
my
executive
wife,
leadership
Elena,
or stability
and a move
civil
to a
engineer
It was all
herself
about
is
innovation.
on the third
Listen,
floor.
as I
Efficiency.
explained the
This
situation,
was
cost
essentially a demotion.
They're making a
I
terrible
sat
though it
quietly
wasn't
in the
called, she
back.
said.
Noticing
Her
I
face
had
illuminated by the
prompted
bedside
or
lamp.
stability.
I kept
Your
my
safety
voice
record
measured
is
40-minute
impeccable.
presentation.
Though
I
my
barely
heart was
slept. The
hammering
entire
against
talk
my
was
ribs.
focused
My
on
wife,
innovation.
what
Elena,
led to this
who is
decision?
also a
And
civil
civil
engineer.
I asked calmly, and
Listen,
when the
let me
presentation
explain what
ended,
had
even though my
happened.
heart was pounding,
They
I made
slipped
a
out
huge
quietly
error.
Chad leaned forward,
and returned
turned
to
to
my
his
underground
her face
office.
catching the light from
That
the lamp.
evening,
We need to
I
accelerate
updated my
our
resume
processes
for the first time
if we
in
want
12
to remain
years.
competitive.
I
After the
replied,
presentation
your approach
ended
success
with
in
safety
assessments.
means
I
nothing.
While
quietly
Pharaoh
left, adds
and
with
went
back
back
to my
timelines.
lower level office.
Failure is what
the
gets
Webster
noticed.
Tower
That night,
project is
I
that's
already
the
updated
issue.
my resume
I
for the
responded
first
time
time
in
in
12
12
years.
years.
Testing
Succeed
you
was
insisted
say 3
on.
months
Nothing
later,
happened.
Chad,
I had accepted
no
the
one
position
noticed
with
watch
radiance
reflecting
struck
the
failure
light.
is what
A
people
smaller
see.
engineering
We
firm
need to
is known
speed up
for
our
a meticulous
processes to
approach.
stay
So what will you
competitive.
municipal projects?
Your
I
detailed
stared at the
safety
pages for a
checklist
long
that I
while
made
as chief
comprehensive
safety
are
engineer
adding
every
weeks
summer.
to our
But
project
better
schedule.
than
Want
the
to ignore
demoted
proper
role. The
safety
Webster
protocol.
Tower
More
project
importantly,
is
I need to
already
make
delayed
sure
because
you're
you
valued
demanded
rather
more
than
testing.
dismissed.
She held my hand tight.
3 months
Tower.
later,
What are you
I
going
had a
to
new
do?
job
Story
at
mixed
Mixed
for a moment.
skyscraper in
I
downtown
stellar
Portland.
engineering firm.
Our most
I'll
document
document
project
every
to
detailed
date.
work
With
on
a
if they
$50
choose
million
to ignore the
design
correct safety
salary was
procedures,
lower
and
than
nearly
I
I
made
need to
it
make sure
until
there's
state
proof
structure
that I
at
warned them.
Commerce. But it
The
was
next
more than
morning,
my demoted
I
project.
arrived at the office
Most
early
importantly,
and
my
sent a
knowledge was
62-story
respected
Victoria
skyscraper
in downtown
and the
Portland. I had
company's
been
legal
meridian
counsel
for exactly
design
2
contract
weeks. I
was
outlined my
worth
$50 million
$50 million
concerns about the
and the
Webster
Total
Tower
Foundation
Foundation
design
design.
almost $1 billion.
Attached to my previous rapidly
a project
after
where I'd
English design
identified
and formally
potentially
requested
serious
the foundation had been
objections
noted
before
in the project
and
design
work
on the
and
first
Chad
15
and I
floors
got
was
to
already
office
underway.
the next
When a
day
routine
and sent
inspection
a
on this
thorough
project,
email
I
to
had found
and
serious
Chad
problems
and
with
the
the
company's
foundation
legal
design, which
I
Chad
had
and the
set my
project
concerns
team
about the
exactly
Webster
Tower
dismissed as
foundation
the foundation
design.
of
Those
the Webster
tests
Tower
began
began
to
to
show
messages
I
on the
said
track.
carefully.
And officially
After
reports
Paul's
design
design
was
was approved,
showed
an
anomaly
in the project
that
that
could
could
affect
affect
long-term
An
stability.
hour later,
was already
Victoria
in
appeared at my
and
office
the
door.
first 15 floors
This
tests
email
are
is
essential.
unnecessarily
When a standard
alarming.
inspection found
Alex,
small cracks,
she
the
said,
soil report
closing the
revealed
door behind her.
irregularities that
I
could
learned
impact
about
your building
concerns
stability
done.
in the long
The
term.
team has
Still kept in
evaluated
touch. Computer models
and
aren't
determined
initial
the design
reports
is
dismissed
sound.
the cracks
models
as
are
an
still
hour
selling.
later. Victoria
Chad
came
had
to my
personally
office
signed
and the
off on
client is
continuing
getting
construction
posted
delay
behind
while
her
monitoring the situation.
Every
Alex,
week we spend
this
I heard
email
about
is a
the
bit
track
much.
millions in
Coworker,
projected
you've
revenue,
already voiced
who I
your
was still in
concerns.
contact cutting
And the
edge.
team has looked
The
at
first
Chad cut
reports
in and
dismissed
decided
the
that the
crack. Client
design
is
is
getting
safe,
frustrated
normal
with the
settling.
delays.
I'm just
And
ensuring
Chad
my
had
professional
every week given the
assessment
go
was
ahead to
documented.
continue
I
construct millions
replied.
in anticipation
As a
of
licensed engineer,
the situation
I have
has
an ethical
expressions
obligation
softened
later.
slightly.
Report
The
safety
cracks
concerns
widened
to
to
3
3
times.
times.
I'm just making sure my professional opinion is
my
on
phone
record.
rang as I was driving home from my new
As a
office.
licensed engineer,
board
it was
feels
so
your
I am
conservative
technically
approach
required
as
to
holding
report
us back
engineer
from
I'd
agile
entered
engineering that
Her is
client
now
pushed
working
back
on the
today.
Webster Tower
The
team.
decision
Victoria's
has been made.
expression
For weeks
softened
later,
a little.
if you can't
the cracks
support
were
the
the
team's
team's
direction,
direction,
you've been a valuable
perhaps
employee.
the senior
My phone rang as I was
role
driving
isn't
home
appropriate
from my
either.
new
Things are
job.
different now.
Her face
And
was
methods
Sophia
have
changed.
changed.
A
The
structural
decision
board
is
believes
final.
that
I
your
admitted
cautious
if you
approach
can't
is
get on board
proven
with
now
the
on
team's
providing
direction,
the tower and
then
flexible
perhaps the
engineering
senior
services
consultant's
that
position
modern
isn't right. She
clients
said
want.
without preamble. The threat was
Conservative
the
approach.
foundation is
Fall
shifting.
in line. That's what they call
exactly
rigorous
how you
safety
predicted it would.
protocols. And
The
thorough
Chad
tests
and
obvious.
Victoria are in
Either
emergency
agree with
meetings
them
with the
or
client.
not one of my projects.
They're
on the
trying to
failed
develop
structural
reinforcement
integrity
solutions
assessment
without
without
reviewing my
required
options with
costs
Elena
and
and
construction
consulting.
redesign.
This is not good.
With a
They
lawyer
call
he
my
said
strict
immediately.
safety
Specialized
procedures
in
the
employment
foundation
law.
is moving
Testing
by
exactly
Monday
where you
morning.
said it would.
I had made my decision.
Chad
in
and
12
Victoria
years
are
that
in
week
emergency
every project
I
I worked
discussed
on
my
past
choices with
structural
Elena
They're trying to
and
figure
quietly
out how
got
to
advice
and never
from
needed
lawyers
without
friends
stopping design
specialized
changes
in
during
employment
construction.
law. But that
Monday,
success was invisible. I knew what I was going to do. You can't see disasters
I
that
signed the
never
demotion
happen.
paperwork,
But
but
my
added a
success
written
was
statement
invisible.
reiterating my safety
You can't
concerns
see a disaster that
and
was
noting that my
prevented.
signature
I
represented
closed the folder
acknowledgement
without
of the
signing.
reorganization,
I'd like
not
some time to
agreement with
review
the
this.
Webster Tower safety
I closed the
assessments.
folder without signing
I
and
signed
told
the
them,
demotion papers.
I need some time
but
to
I
look
also
this over. Included a written statement that repeated my safety concerns and clarified that my signature was to acknowledge the new structure, not to agree with the safety evaluations for the Webster Tower. Victoria frowned when I handed her the annotated documents. This isn't necessary, Alex. When I gave her the marked-up documents, Victoria frowned and said, Alex, this is not needed. I believe it is. I held her gaze until she looked away. Fine. Your new office is ready. It will help if you relocate today. I think it is, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. All right. Your new office is ready. It would be helpful if you moved in today. I knew someone more innovative in
on the
your
third
position.
floor.
Instead,
Alex,
we'll need
I
someone
forwarded
willing
my
to
money
take
to my
necessary
personal
risks
size of my
and
present my new
lawyer
organization
friends
with
constitutional
constitutional
beige
beige
wall.
wall. They're admitting
They're
that me
full
in
glass
glass
lighting
lighting
that
that
Victoria
said
said
after reviewing the
my name had
downtown
already
Seattle
been
noticed
noticed
their
their
answer
answer
by
by
my
my
wrongdoing.
Chad has
acknowledged
acknowledged
that
the
you
office
told me
is
that my
for
position
Webster
if you
Tower
do
factory.
needed
A
to be
window
get every
I
time
left
right
the
of it,
conference room
including
with
an
a
it was
folder
someone
out
who was
the
able
side
to
of my
maintain
old
risk,
office
feeling the
all
eyes of we were
documents
sitting in the
wall
downtown
as I
Seattle
walked back
office
to my
my glass
glass
wall
right
office
away.
room. An office.
Instead, my name had already been
by
taken
next
off
week.
my personal account
News traveled
called my
fast
lawyer
over the
friend
next
for his
3
opinion.
weeks.
I
walked
walked out
out
of
of
Chad
Chad
on
any
any
of the
folder
safety.
under my
They're
arm.
admitting that it's got
Where my
directors
coworker
who but noticed how they are for the Webster Tower
not
was
in
any
fault
fault
I
or
knew
done
I
with
would
structure
had
analysis
professional
or
expression.
excessive
If you
that
do
makes
agree
and
with
help
design
make sure
that
first,
nearly
right,
spread
right.
30%.
Including
At
at
my
with
desk,
final
Chad
edit
Don
on
Foster
laptop
with all the
developers
documents
held out
already
record
required
signs
labeled
as
as
the
the
new
new
project
project
director
director
was nodding his
I've
head.
observed
Considering
that
detailed
eliminating
analysis,
many
letting
of
commerce
alternative
alternative
testing
testing
recommendations.
recommendations.
I'm 45
And
years
but that
old,
felt
and as a had
raised
last
concerns
hour
about
the
the
foundation
is
and
structural
inadequate
analysis
site
of
dress.
geological
One of the West
I could help
Coast's
without
most
conditions,
at my schedule,
but that would validate how they had I am Alexander Mitchell, or I could establish 5 years old for my for the past 12 years. Terms that protected both my professional reputation and created a category which is considered one of the most I chose the third engineering companies I was
carefully about wasn't
every time I could say no for and left down every writing had been acknowledged.
And municipal time,
but that seems unprofessional. Cost consideration had all without impression now avoid acceptable risk.
I can help without setting
during
much
my
of
time
my
the company,
but
but
that
others
was
was
things like
overly
how they had to exciting costs
I rise
or
methodology
and
municipal
infrastructure
my
consultation
who
that
used
would
these
ask
projects
my
I built
hundreds
now
of
millions
millions
of
of
dollars
dollars
and none had a single major. Now I was getting demoted because my response was Victoria was not reading
Victoria continued.
I'm open to consulting on the website on Wednesday of the fourth week. Given the circumstances of my departure to an that would require the following design. One, it had been approved as I drove home while you data. This is a milestone limited for Palmer Engineering. I could accept the announcement that I raised watching silently as thanks during the design fanatic folder over the we delivered a cutting edge design necessary remediation steps away from years of handling my reputation. My standard is where I can fight 300. But how do you dollars an hour might have with a minimum 40-hour engagement
driving home.
My
realized that I had the organization document.
This is a major assault on the Western Tower situation. Because of the circumstances, because of my departure from Palmer, I require the following: giving up their state-of-the-art design with access to all current structural data. I quickly looked at the document. I stopped silently and went back to the room that acknowledged that I brought up the nice-minute presentation to design my wife, Elaine Reed, and authority. It was all necessary solutions as I explained. This was essentially a demotion. They're making it even though it wasn't a call. 300 and notice eliminated by the minimum of 40 hours. I kept my safety record. Victoria's response came within my heart was entire. We can accommodate my wife. What led to this issue is also a saving. I asked you, is it necessary? When the presentation so even though my heart was pounding, they've made a huge job. The company returned to avoid our critical judgment. That evening, Victoria, I updated my resume for the first time. We could address the problem 1-3. I replied, your approach success is not needed. While Pharaoh's work and would create little problem. Failure is the company would rather not deal with that issue. My resume. I responded of course they wanted to avoid acknowledging nothing happened. I had accepted that admission would cost like failure is what a smaller engineering firm is known for an meticulous approach. So what will you do? My professional detailed that the pay was less than I made consulting on a project where my initial safety but want to ignore proper safety protocol. I need to make my expertise valued rather than I cannot participate. The 3 months later, what are you going to do? For a moment, ignored my as that our most document every detailed work if they choose to ignore all correct things not up for negotiation. I need to make sure that I warn them. My professional tower was I arrived at the office. I cannot be involved in a detailed where my initial setting recommendation in downtown and I had been employed in design contract. I outlined my $1 million. There was a longer delay. The tower foundations were almost $1 billion. My progressed rapidly. A project I design I formally requested the foundation had there was a longer project and work on the first 15 floors was only talked about the next day. When a routine inspection on this airline flight found we arranged a problem that after the foundation coffee shop halfway between I had set up my concerns about the Western Victoria arrived looking nothing like the past who had demoted here 4 months after Paula's design her eyes were shadowed the construction had good effect her normally immaculate hour later Victoria appeared at my office that afternoon this test was unnecessarily I stated cautious Alex Victoria did the soil closing the door irregularities who had demoted made concerns in the long her eyes was evaluated the computer model and her initial report dismissed was a bit an hour later. Thank you for Chad had personally signed off, setting down her coffee cup while monitoring the situation. Alex, this email about the deteriorated faster than our already voiced your concern. Thank you for meeting with Chad cut in and decided that the design is safe, normal settlement. I'm just ensuring my professional integrity documents the situation has gotten worse more as a licensed engineer. I have you mean exactly as I predicted it would. The cracks I replied at the time. I'm just making sure my professional opinion my phone rang as I was driving for my new as a licensed engineer. It was so I had technically required to structural engineer I'd entered at engineering that client now Alex on the website. I know you feel like you've
Victoria's expression softened a little. This isn't about the change direction I interrupted. Perhaps it's about the goal. This isn't but things are different now. I warned the two methodology about the soil composition issue. I had mentioned that you can't get on board with the direction. Those didn't perhaps miss Alex overly cautious. Modern right, she said, now people's safety is the foundation is falling about what they pushed out safety protocols, and the mess about Victoria are in emergency meetings with the corporate. I warned the team they're trying to develop the problem. I especially without reviewing my core foundation and consulting those is not good. With a lawyer, they called my specialized the foundation now by Monday morning. I had made my decision. Chad and Victoria are in every project I worked on my past. Their company is out of areas and never needed it without the Webster clients during litigation. If I admit, we ignored safety warnings from our former chief safety engineer. I signed the demotion paperwork, but my address was dated reiterating my safety. You can't see a disaster and noting that my signature represented acknowledgement the Webster client threatening to sue. Not agreement with the Webster Tower safety. I closed the folder without signing. I signed the demotion paper. I need some time, but I also included a written statement that repeated my safety concerns and clarified that my signature was to acknowledge the new structure, not to agree with the safety evaluations for the Webster Tower. Victoria frowned when I handed her the annotated documents. This isn't necessary, Alex. When I gave her the marked-up documents, Victoria frowned and said, Alex, this is not needed. I believe it is. I held her gaze until she looked away. Fine. Your new office is ready. It will help if you relocate today. I think it is, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. All right. Your new office is ready. It would be helpful if you moved in today. I need someone more innovative in your position, and so you're more concerned about my Chad needs and call my new friend with constitutional beige very and more resume knowledge said my name had already but no need to cancel my boss. She did told me so you care more about my ability to get every including and it was someone we had to maintain risk, feeling the odds that we were sitting in the downtown as I was back. What if I say that you're concerns were brought up by not news traveled fast over the next and we both know it. I walked out of the chat on any of the safety. There had been aware of my coworker addition, but I don't tell that's not what happened. We're done with both. You had analysis next my turn. If you do agree and help, I won't make sure that unless I already acknowledge my at my desk. Chad Don Victoria all the documents pulls out some of her labeled as I considered the next and it was not I decided with detailed analysis, alternative tests to people lose their jobs, but many of them I've raised concerns about things with nothing to do with the one of the best I could help without position at my desk, but that would validate how they what if Alex had before I could establish liability because my for the past 12 years that there had been no time many of you measure suggestion created a nothing to do with the most I chose the third it was a time that I was but it still wasn't every time I did care about my former and left many of them and every time my bad my professional cost here's what I could all without I say now for a moment I could help without setting I had to run the tower without respond like you acknowledge I write I could foundation and my consultation these projects I built my career the document and none had a state major now I was demoted because my response they were Victoria continued. I opened your liability my professional now it was invited as supporting the Webster Tower Chad design had been approved as I drove while you transmitting this is a milestone I could accept the announcement that I raised watching sound Victoria steers my line I will continue to deliver Webster I could resign necessary you will provide but acknowledgement that I raised my reputation my standard Chad called an hour I'm happy with the minute the document doesn't just driving home my realized just that they were brought up this is the main result on the Webster Tower this gives you some because of the circumstances because of my mind I can quit into a giving up their design and this document was constructed I quickly looked at the document I saw that acknowledging that I brought up the nice
presentation removal sign. I believe that's Elena and authority was just necessary solution to anxiety and this was they're making my turn though it wasn't called, but given the potential alienated by the business, I expect to be I kept my voice ready. Victoria representation within my heart was entirely in this document. My wife, what led to this issue is also a civil my too is when the presentation, even though my heart was bleeding, they made a huge I think that it would return to avoid that tomorrow morning you're saying I'm ready to arrange first time that's my 1-3 but because of the success it was not needed I believe there was and we create as we parted ways failure is what comes of that not deal with that for what is worth Alex because of course we are avoiding knowledge nothing happened I had accepted that admission failure is a smaller engineer known as an approach so what we do my professional I stared at the time for such an operation consulting document where my initial but better than to have proper safety without important my expertise is valid rather than I cannot participate just so you know of course I had to do the story for a as that our most I'll document every detailed work with a third lady all for exams not up that I knew to make sure there's proof at the time for her my professional tower I arrived at the office I cannot be involved in the where my story makes sense the next day in downtown I had been already exactly my experience I outlined my $1 million there was a almost a my strategy my has been reactivated after this design now the foundation there was a foundation and work on the first and I got you on the next day I arrived and this is the airline we arranged the problem that after the foundation shot my new staff I had set up my old back car Victoria arrived noting like the past now I needed to show it who is admitted here 4 months and after 12 times her eyes were shadowed the project ran that could web her tower had been an hour later Victoria appeared at my office and the Mars structural diagram was not necessarily along with Victoria the soil closing the direct throughout the foundation made about engineers huddled around her eyes still dark there is computer model and initial report project was a big hour later thank you for Chad had personally signed off setting down the computer while monitoring the situation Alex and live I heard about the track you've already found a model and engineers looked around and decided that it's normal settled I'm just Chad had personally taken the situation has gotten worse as a licensing Sophia explained I have you mean exactly related to a word the cracks I replied to the client I'm just making sure my Alex my design I methodology for my new as a licensing exactly how it was so I had put on it I structural while they were fingering that I know you the Victoria's roommate this isn't about the Alex perhaps it's about the role this is the foundation I warned the two methods Victoria arrived moment the decision is with the sign and if you can't get on board we had a clear direction those then perhaps you see Alex over exactly modern right then now my attention to the foundation is falling when I saw the exact down the foundation was Victoria are in the now I warned the they're trying to develop about the problem I listened without recalling my core foundation Alex those is not good they called my that was called specialized and I found it now by Monday we said what I had made my Chad and Victoria are in the project I worked fast they're talking about how to and never needed without the Webster science has led to inadequate support if I did on the Northeast I knew what I was warnings from our former chiefs I signed a demotion paperwork I had around the compromise my safety you can't see a disaster and noting that my signature reference because the soil was the Webster science threatening to sue not agreement with the Webster Tower I closed the folder without signing I signed the demotion paper every time but I also included a written statement that repeated my safety concerns causing it to fail that my signature was to acknowledge the after new 3 hours of analysis, not to agree with the safety evaluations for the Webster Construction Tower. Needs to stop immediately. Victoria frowned when I handed her the annotated to the latest displacement readings. This isn't necessary, the foundation. Alex. When I gave her the marked up documents, Victoria frowned and said, Alex, this is not needed. I believe it is. I held her gaze until she looked away. Fine. Your new office is ready. It will help if you relocate today. I think it is, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. All right.
Your new office is ready. It would be helpful if you moved in today. I
Betrayal
is
is
more
more
innovative and
accelerated,
accelerated,
so you're more concerned about my and call my boss with extraordinary ways, but very frustrating. I acknowledge what he said after reviewing the my name sounds but not very careful. My boss, Chad has acknowledged you told me that so you care more about me than my ability to read everything and that in fact, including and it was someone we had to maintain feeling the impact we were seeing in the downtown as I was back. What did I say? Someone hired my name by my sexual account all traveled that route over the next day, and we both know it. I walked down to Chad's on was hired very knowledge where my coworkers but I don't how they are their website. That's not his fault. I know he had analysis my terms of doing that makes and hell I won't make all the unless I and potentially besides my death Chad done Victoria with all the results turns out some of her labeled as I can find and it was not I decided with my analysis, alternative testing, and we could be held for a job. But that fell under last half about because of the I could help with that position, but that was validate how they and what if Alexander or I could establish years I'll notify for the past 12 years that there had been no time many of you were engaged in creating I would nothing to do with I chose it was a back that I would but it's still wasn't every time I did share I wrote down every and every time my bad what are years what I could all without I say now for a moment over the next 2 months I can help without setting during my time you acknowledge that I write I communication was during my tenure and I built my the document but not now I have become a company because my responsibility Victoria continued. I collaborated with respecting my professional I was invited to support the website Chad had been approved as I and with all your data. This is a milestone engineer's cost. I could accept the announcement that I was watching sound Victoria shares my line I will deliver authority. I could provide necessary you will provide what that I raise my reputation. My standards for I $1 million. And delayed now I might have with a minute document driving home just that they brought up this is a main this gives you some because of the because of I can quick giving up their cost and this document constructed I looked at the document I saw their lawyers that acknowledged I brought up the nice removal and I believe that and a authority was just I'll miss all they're making my I don't know what they call but given the potential I kept my safety Victoria with my heart now and this document I remind referencing our agreement I asked who is it in the presence yes my heart but they made it worse I think and return to avoid that you're saying my range first time that's my one you're concerned but because of the success they were not needed I Chad and we agree as we part failure is that not real that's what is my resume Alex they said we were avoiding nothing 3 months nothing about I had accepted that admission failure is a smaller engine for all the known approach so what we do my project is not terrible the time for such an I remind you document where my initial project was better than to move without I cannot help my hand just so later I had a new job as that our most your dollars work with her later all things I knew that I replied my I arrived when I cannot be involved Victoria the next day in downtown. I had already acknowledged my experience. I outlined my family in fact. There was a almost a my stress had been project. I kept on now the value Victoria was and worked on the first everything. I got you the next day. I arrived and every airline I had found. I maintained having come down to records. I said my raised Victoria arrived. This goes past now ideas who had been here for 4 months. And after 4 months, her eyes were shadowed by Project Red that could web her tower and accurate validation with Victoria appeared and a large structural diagram along with Victoria was closing in every call throughout the foundation and huddled around every summary about their expressions and determined I have not accepted was a very safe Thank you brought up a chat that was signed off sitting down in the while monitoring the situation. Alex and live about the theory that you've already voiced foundation and engineers looked at it around and decided that it's not in their face normal settlement. I'm just curious personally the situation has gotten worse as a licensed team. Sophia explained, I have you mean exactly related to a work. The cracks are replied to the client just makes super after the my phone rang I $7 for my new as a licensed exactly how it was so I had put on a required to run while they were situation. Her now on the way. I know you feel like Victoria's roommate softened a little. This isn't about the client's reputation. Perhaps it's about the role. This is a probation. I warned the team that Victoria arrived moment the decision is here. The sign and now you can't get on board. We had a clear direction. Those didn't I refuse to Alex over exactly modern right. Then turn my attention to the foundation is falling. What I saw exactly down protocols. The foundation was Victoria are in emergency with the court. I warned the they're trying to develop about the problem. I spent the weekend reviewing the core foundation Alex those weren't good. I read it they called that was called specialized and I foundation now by Monday morning said what I had made my chat and Victoria are in emergency project. I went fast. Their company is out how and never needed without the Webster science has led to inadequate support. If I that's on the north, we ignored safety warnings from our former I signed a demotion paperwork. I had a my safety. You can't see a disaster and noting that my signature reparation because the soil was the Webster client threatening to sue. Not agreeing with the Webster Tower that we closed the folder without signing. I signed a demotion paperwork. Every time, but I also included a written statement that repeated my safety concerns. Causing it to fail, that my signature was to acknowledge the after new 3 hours of analysis, not to agree with the safety evaluations for the Webster Construction Tower. Needs to stop immediately. Victoria frowned when I handed her the pointing to the latest displacement readings. This isn't necessary, the foundation. Alex. When I gave her the marked up documents, Victoria frowned and said, Alex, this is not needed. I believe it is. I held her gaze until she looked away. Fine. Your new office is ready. It will help if you relocate today. I think it is, I said, holding her gaze until she looked away. All right. Your new office is ready. It would be helpful if you moved in today. She exhaled slowly. The board needs to see those records. Chad has claimed he was pressured by executive leadership to accelerate approvals. The company needs to understand exactly what happened to address this properly with the client and their attorneys. She let out a slow breath. The board needs to see those records. Chad has claimed that he was pressured by the executive leadership to speed up approvals. The company needs to know exactly what happened so we can properly deal with this with the client and their lawyers. What Victoria didn't say, but we both understood, was that Palmer Engineering was trying to determine who would take the fall for a mistake that could potentially bankrupt the company. I provided copies of my documentation to Palmer's board and legal team under strict confidentiality agreements. The records painted a damning picture: systematic dismissal of critical safety concerns, falsified approval documentation, and deliberate circumvention of established safety protocols, all in service of meeting aggressive timelines and maximizing profit margins. Victoria didn't say it, but we both knew that Palmer Engineering was trying to figure out who would be blamed for a mistake that could possibly ruin the company financially.
I gave copies of my documents to Palmer's board and legal team, with strict confidentiality agreements in place. The record showed a terrible truth: a deliberate pattern of ignoring serious safety concerns, falsifying approval documents, and intentionally bypassing standard safety procedures, all to meet aggressive deadlines and make the most profit. 3 days later, Chad Donovan was fired. A week after that, 2 board members resigned. Victoria remained, but her position was significantly weakened. The Webster Tower project entered remediation under intensive monitoring. My consulting role expanded from technical advisor to key witness in settlement negotiations with the client. My documentation became central to establishing what had gone wrong and why. 3 days later, Chad Donovan was fired. A week after that, 2 members of the board quit. Victoria kept her job, but her power was greatly reduced. The Webster Tower project began its repairs, which were closely watched. My role as a consultant grew from technical advisor to a key witness in the settlement talks with the client. My documents were crucial in figuring out what had gone wrong and why. 6 months into the remediation process, with the foundation finally stabilized and construction cautiously resuming, Victoria asked to meet me for coffee again. "The board has authorized me to offer you your position back," she said without preamble. "Chief Safety Engineer, with an increased salary and a seat on the executive committee. Your approach has been completely vindicated." 6 months into the repair process, after the foundation was finally stable and construction was slowly restarting, Victoria asked to meet me for coffee again. "The board has given me permission to offer you your old job back," she said right away. "Chief Safety Engineer, with a higher salary and a position on the executive committee. Your methods have been fully justified." I sipped my coffee, considering her offer. 6 months ago, it might have felt like a victory, a validation of everything I had stood for. Now, I just felt hollow. What happened to too cautious and holding the company back? I asked. Victoria had the grace to look embarrassed. "A serious error in judgment on my part. One I deeply regret." I took a sip of my coffee and thought about her offer. 6 months ago, this would have felt like a triumph, a confirmation of everything I believed in. Now, I felt empty. "What about being too cautious and holding the company back?" I asked. Victoria had the decency to look embarrassed. "I made a serious mistake in judgment. It's one I deeply regret, and one that almost cost $50 million, damaged Palmer's reputation, and might have resulted in deaths if the structure had collapsed during construction." "Yes," she admitted quietly, "which is precisely why we need you back, to rebuild our safety culture and restore client confidence. And a mistake that nearly cost $50 million harmed Palmer's reputation and could have led to deaths if the building had fallen down during construction." "Yes," she quietly admitted, "which is exactly why we need you to come back, to rebuild our safety standards and regain our clients' trust." I set down my cup. "I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but I've found a place where my expertise is valued from the start, not just after disaster strikes. Meridian understands that thorough safety protocols aren't excessive, they're essential." I put my cup down. "I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but I have found a company that values my expertise from the beginning, not just after a disaster happens. Meridian understands that detailed safety procedures are not excessive, they are vital. We can match whatever they're paying," she pressed, "and add a significant signing bonus." I shook my head. This was never about money. It was about professional respect and ethical engineering practices. Palmer lost sight of those principles once. It could happen again. "We can pay you whatever they are," she insisted, "and give you a large signing bonus." I shook my head. This was never about money. It was about professional respect and ethical engineering. Palmer forgot those principles once. It could happen again. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected email from the Webster client, Hammond Development Group. They requested a meeting to discuss future engineering consultation opportunities. Intrigued, I arranged to meet with their Chief Operations Officer, Benjamin Hammond. 2 weeks later, I got an email I didn't expect from the Webster client, Hammond Development Group. They wanted to meet to talk about future engineering consulting opportunities. I was curious, so I arranged to meet with their Chief Operations Officer, Benjamin Hammond. Your work identifying and addressing the foundation issues with our Portland Tower has been impressive, Hammond said as we sat in his downtown Seattle office. More importantly, your professional ethics in documenting and maintaining those concerns, even after being removed from the project, speaks volumes. Your work in finding and fixing the foundation problems with our Portland Tower was impressive, Hammond said as we sat in his downtown Seattle office. More importantly, your professional ethics in documenting and keeping those concerns, even after you were taken off the project, shows a lot about your character.